It's kind of interesting how many popular stories these days come with some sort of mature content label. But it does bring up on the question on what we consider mature. And I want to start a conversation about that. Because sometimes calling something mature just feels like a way to get more eyes on it. Now, I am an advocate for making stories profitable and good, and I don't think there's as big a gap as some people make it out to be. But of course, let's be honest. Action and sets does tend to draw people in. But are those things really necessary for telling a mature story? Or do we just label things mature simply because they have those elements in it? For that matter, why do we need mature stories anyway? Does it somehow make a story better just because it's so called mature? Or is it simply, as I said earlier, another way to get eyes on it, because there might be something taboo in there? And let's not kid ourselves, because sometimes just having those taboo things in there is also like being told not to press the shiny red button. We might not have thought about before, but now that someone said that we shouldn't or that it's taboo, we kind of want to find out what it is or what it does. Which also brings up that common plot point of kids being told they can't go see a movie because they aren't old enough, which almost makes it that much more interesting to them. Like, why can't I do that? Now, generally it turns out to be a horror film, so they end up getting found out when they have trouble sleeping later on. So there is a typical justification for having a mature content label. And I do agree with that, at least as a guideline for parents, who I believe should have the final say on what their children's entertainment is. And it also ties into what will at least be my response going forward when anyone asks if my content or stories are okay for children. Go for it first and then decide because you know your children. Because just because someone is of a certain age does not mean they are aware or unaware of certain concepts. Which is actually what I think often gets overlooked in discussions about mature content. It's the concepts themselves. And it goes back to something I read in a book I'm writing a while back, in that you don't have to go into details on something in order to get a point across. Sometimes it can be even more effective not to show something, especially in regards to horror or a character's end. It's instead on the other character's reactions to give an idea of what happened. Now you can definitely give hints, but you don't have to spell everything out. Like how a couple might be getting romantic, but then it's going to touch the morning. There's an idea of what happened, but you don't actually have to make the scene. Again, you don't have to show or tell it all. You can let the audience imagination and maturity fill in the gaps. But going back to the concepts themselves is that we often have an idea of something being a dark concept or at least complicated, so they may not be appropriate for younger audiences. Yet, considering how often there's some plan to destroy a world in cartoons or what we might think of as kid stuff, maybe our issue has more to do with how we think about the concept than what the concept actually is. Because for things we want to demonstrate as being what you shouldn't do, it can be rather easy to task the villain in a role for that bad action. The Emperor wants to conquer everything, so he will be in control. And then that's kind of a thing of be wary of people who are longing for power or are always striving for more power and more control. The witch has been using illusions to make the heroes doubt what they know to be true. That's a way of warning about gaslighting, of what you know being of someone basically doing, but that's not what really happened, and so forth. The kind of gaslighting that can very easily happen. And another one would be that villains stole the treasure for themselves, being greed and thievery. But if we do things like that, then we might actually have to make a stand on something, rather than being able to see or excuse everything as being in shades of gray. And isn't that one of the hallmarks of mature storytelling? Things to not be black and white, and being a paragon of virtue will get the hero nowhere. This is a story based in reality. Now, hard choices do exist, but do the ends really justify the means? Maybe the whole point of mature storytelling and gray moralities is to point out that nobody gets it right, even if they had the best intentions starting out. But what would a story look like that pushed for a better way? Instead of seeing the win or lose scenario, or the lose-lose scenario that seems to gain popularity sometimes, they will strive to find a win-win solution. consider how many people might be opposed to that possibility. It could even have most of the tasks set in these gray areas that are so popular, but with a more positive bent to the story arc than most stories that have that as a setting. In fact, the hero might actually struggle with having to toll for there being no deal a few times just in order to reach that ending that they are so hoping for. Could that be a mature story to tell? Or is it too optimistic for that label? I'll end this sort of stream of thoughts here for now and get back to the point of this video, which is to start a conversation about what we consider mature, at least in regards to storytelling. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that matter, so why not share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, you can give it a like to help other people see it as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lionsman Media, where we celebrate stories and the lessons we learn from them. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.